The Fifth Discipline by Peter M. Senge. Picture yourself managing a local store. Business is steady, customers keep coming back, and there's this one beer brand, let's call it Lover's Beer, that practically sells itself. 4 cases a week, like clockwork. You order 4, you sell 4. Simple, predictable, perfect. Then, everything changes. One week you sell 8 cases, you have no idea why, but hey, who's complaining? You bump your order to 8 cases to keep up. The following week, another 8 cases fly off the shelves. But here's the problem. Your delivery only brings the 4 cases you ordered a month ago. Your shelves are starting to look empty. Customers are asking for Lover's Beer, and you're getting nervous. So you order 12 cases, just to be safe, Build up a little cushion. Weeks crawl by. The beer you desperately ordered still hasn't shown up. Your shelves sit bare. Customers are frustrated. You hear whispers that every other store in town is sold out too. This beer is suddenly the hottest thing around. You start thinking, what is that wholesaler doing to me? Don't they see how crazy this market is? You feel helpless, trapped by an incompetent supply chain, so you do the only thing that makes sense. You order more. 16 cases, then 24. You're practically begging for product. Now, let's jump over to the wholesaler's perspective. He's watching these massive, panicked orders flood in from you and dozens of other retailers. He thinks, holy cow, this beer is exploding. But he's just as frustrated as you are. He can't squeeze enough product out of the brewery. His warehouse is empty. Orders are piling up, unfilled. He feels like a victim, too, cursing the slow, unresponsive brewery. So he starts placing enormous orders, 20 truckloads, then 40, then 60. And what about the brewery? They see these absolutely colossal orders rolling in from wholesalers, and they lose their minds. They hire new workers, run the factory around the clock, and probably give their marketing department a huge bonus for creating this incredible boom. They feel like heroes racing to satisfy an unstoppable market. And then, it all falls apart. Suddenly, the beer arrives, mountains of it, truckloads, pallets, stacked to the ceiling. It floods the wholesaler's warehouse. But just as this tsunami of beer hits, the orders from retailers drop to 0. Everyone's sitting on more inventory than they can move in months. The wholesaler, now drowning in product, cancels everything from the brewery. And the brewery, which just invested heavily in expansion, finds itself with warehouses full of beer nobody wants anymore. People lose their jobs. Fingers point in every direction. The retailer blames the wholesaler. The wholesaler blames the brewery. The brewery blames fickle customers. Everyone's a victim. Everyone's pointing fingers. But here's the twist. What if nobody was actually to blame? What if the entire crisis, the boom, the panic, the bust, was triggered by one tiny change? A change that happened way back in week 2. When customer demand for Lover's Beer went from 4 cases a week to 8 cases a week. And then it stayed there. Flat. Steady. For the rest of the entire time, the wild, chaotic swings that nearly destroyed 3 businesses weren't caused by some external disaster. They were caused by the people inside the system itself. They were caused by the way they thought. This is the central mystery that Peter M. Senge unravels in his groundbreaking book, The Fifth Discipline, The Art and Practice of the Learning Organization. This isn't just another business manual. It's a blueprint for seeing the world through completely different eyes. It's about uncovering the invisible forces, the hidden structures that silently control our lives, our teams, and our organizations. Senge, a brilliant thinker from MIT, shows us that we're not prisoners of these systems. We're prisoners of our own thinking. Over the next hour, we're going on a journey. We're going to explore why brilliant teams so often stumble, why our best solutions frequently make problems worse, and how we can learn to see the world not as a collection of broken pieces, but as a living, breathing, interconnected whole. By the time we're done, you won't just understand the 5 disciplines of a learning organization. You'll have a completely new lens for examining your own life. You'll spot hidden patterns in your family dynamics, in your workplace, even in your own mind. And you'll discover that the power to change your world, or at least your corner of it, begins with a simple but profound shift in how you think. Have you ever been part of a team where everyone was ridiculously smart, but somehow, when you all got together, you made decisions that seemed, well, kind of dumb? Like the collective IQ of the group dropped to about half of the smartest person in the room? Or have you ever tried to fix a problem, only to watch your solution spawn a whole new set of problems, sometimes even worse than what you started with? These experiences are so common, so universal, that we just accept them as frustrating facts of life. We blame office politics, bad luck, or other people's incompetence. But Peter Senge offers a much deeper explanation. These aren't isolated incidents, he says. They're symptoms of profound learning disabilities baked into the structure of our organizations. And, more importantly, into the way we've been taught to think since childhood. From a very young age, he explains, we're trained to break problems apart, to fragment the world into smaller, more manageable pieces. In school, you have math class, then science class, then history class, all in separate rooms, taught by different teachers. We learn to focus on the pieces, not the whole, and we carry this habit straight into our careers. This creates the first learning disability. I am my position. Think about American automakers in Detroit for a moment. For years, they couldn't figure out how Japanese companies were making cars with such precision at lower costs. So they took a Japanese car apart, piece by piece. On one engine block, they found the same standard bolt used in 3 different places, mounting 3 different components. On their American car, the same job required 3 different bolts, needing 3 different wrenches and 3 different inventory items. It was slower, more expensive, and more complicated to assemble. Why? Because the Detroit design team was split into 3 groups. Each group handled their component, and only their component. From their narrow perspective, they were successful. Their bolt worked perfectly for their part. They had no clue that their isolated success was contributing to the system's overall failure. They couldn't see consequences beyond the boundaries of their job description. They had become their position. When we focus only on our little puzzle piece, Senge says, we lose our sense of connection to the larger whole. And when the entire system fails, we're left wondering why, assuming someone else must have screwed up. This leads directly to the second disability. The enemy is out there. When we can't see our own role in the problems we face, it's natural to find someone or something else to blame. Marketing blames manufacturing for poor quality. Manufacturing blames engineering for bad designs. Engineering blames marketing for not understanding customers. It's an endless cycle of finger-pointing. This is exactly what played out in the beer game. The retailer was furious with the incompetent wholesaler. The wholesaler blamed the unresponsive brewery. The brewery was convinced fickle customers were the problem. In each case, the enemy was out there. But the truth? Their enemy was a shadow of their own actions, reflected back through system delays. They couldn't see that out there and in here were part of one interconnected system. This disability, Senge warns, makes it nearly impossible to find real leverage for solving our deepest problems, because we're always looking in the wrong place. The third disability is subtle, often disguised as a virtue, the illusion of taking charge. We're constantly told to be proactive, to be aggressive, to face problems head-on. But Senge cautions that too often, proactiveness is just reactiveness in disguise. When we aggressively fight an enemy out there, we're still reacting. We're still trapped in the same feedback loop, just pushing harder. An insurance company, fed up with being pushed around by lawyers, decides to fight every claim in court. They feel proactive, like they're finally taking charge. But a deeper look reveals this proactive strategy will actually increase their total costs, because they simply can't win enough cases to justify the expense. True proactiveness, Senge argues, doesn't come from an aggressive emotional state. It comes from seeing how we contribute to our own problems. It's a product of our way of thinking. And that thinking is crippled by another disability, the fixation on events. Our conversations, our news feeds, our entire culture is dominated by short-term events, last month's sales figures, the latest scandal, the stock market's daily ups and downs. We're conditioned to see life as a series of events, and for every event, we believe there's an obvious, immediate cause. The stock market dropped today because of yesterday's bad earnings report. Senge says this thinking is part of our evolutionary programming. The caveman who survived was the one who could react quickly to the saber-toothed tiger appearing over his shoulder. He wasn't rewarded for contemplating the long-term migration patterns of tigers. The irony? Today, the primary threats to our survival, both for organizations and societies, aren't sudden events. They're slow, gradual processes. Climate change, the erosion of public education, the slow decline in a company's product quality compared to competitors. If we only focus on events, the best we can ever do is react. We might try to predict events and respond optimally. But we can never learn to create. We can never shape our future. We're forever trapped in a cycle of reacting to the present. This leads us to one of the book's most powerful and haunting metaphors, the parable of the boiled frog. If you drop a frog into boiling water, it'll immediately try to jump out. But if you place it in lukewarm water and slowly turn up the heat, the frog will do nothing. In fact, it'll probably relax and enjoy itself. As the temperature gradually rises, the frog becomes groggier and groggier until it can't climb out anymore. It'll sit there and boil to death, never noticing the danger. Why? Because the frog's survival instincts are tuned to sudden changes, not slow, gradual ones. Senge argues that entire industries, like the American auto industry in the 1960s and 70s, have been boiled frogs. They didn't see the gradual rise of Japanese competitors as a threat. When Japan's market share hit 4%, it wasn't a problem. At 10%, still no crisis. By the time they realized the water was boiling, it was almost too late to jump. To avoid the frog's fate, Senge tells us, we must slow down. We have to pay attention to the subtle, not just the dramatic. We must learn to see the gradual processes that often pose the greatest threats. But even if we slow down, we face another challenge, perhaps the most profound of all, the delusion of learning from experience. We learn best from direct experience. We learn to walk by trying, falling, and trying again. We take an action, see the consequence, and adjust. But what happens when we can no longer see the consequences of our actions? What if the most important consequences show up years in the future, or in a completely different part of the organization? This is the core learning dilemma facing every organization. The most critical decisions we make, investing in new technology, promoting people to leadership, developing new products, have consequences that stretch over years or even decades. The effects ripple across different departments in ways we can't see from our own position. We learn best from experience, but we never directly experience the consequences of many of our most important decisions. Our actions have consequences beyond our learning horizon, making it impossible to learn from them. To cope, we break organizations into smaller functional pieces: marketing, finance, research and development. But these pieces become fiefdoms, stovepipes, that cut off contact between functions. And the most important problems, the ones that cross functional lines, become impossible to solve. So who's supposed to sort this out? The management team, of course. The collection of savvy, experienced leaders who should see the big picture. This brings us to the seventh and final learning disability, the myth of the management team. All too often, Senge says, management teams aren't teams at all. They're groups of individuals fighting for turf, avoiding anything that makes them look bad, and pretending to agree on collective strategy while privately harboring deep reservations. Real inquiry feels threatening. We're trained from school never to admit we don't know the answer. Corporations reward people who advocate their views most forcefully, not those who ask difficult questions. The result is what organizational thinker Chris Argyris calls skilled incompetence. Teams full of people who are incredibly proficient at keeping themselves from learning. They're masters of avoiding conflict, smoothing over differences, and preserving the appearance of a cohesive team, all while the organization quietly boils in the pot. These 7 learning disabilities aren't just features of poorly run companies. They're woven into the fabric of almost every organization. They're tragic because they go largely undetected and operate, despite the best efforts of bright, committed people. When we look at the chaos of the beer game through this lens, we see it not as a failure of individuals, but as a perfect demonstration of these disabilities in action. The players became their positions, blind to how their orders affected others. They saw the enemy as out there, never suspecting their own role in the crisis. The more they tried to take charge by placing huge orders, the worse they made things. They fixated on weekly events, orders arriving, inventory levels, and missed the larger boom and bust pattern they were creating. They were boiled frogs, slowly cranking up the heat on themselves, not realizing the danger until warehouses overflowed. And they couldn't learn from experience, because the consequences of their ordering decisions were delayed and showed up in someone else's part of the system. In the end, everyone felt like a victim, blaming everyone else, but as we discovered, there were no villains, there was only a system. The problems were built into the very structure of the game. This reveals the first and most important principle of the entire book: structure influences behavior. When placed in the same system, Senge explains, different people tend to produce similar results. The cause of our problems isn't bad people, it's bad structures. We must look beyond individual mistakes and personalities. We must examine the underlying structures that shape our actions and create conditions where these types of events become inevitable. As the great writer Leo Tolstoy wrote in War and Peace, historians try to explain great movements of people by focusing on the actions of a few leaders, like Napoleon. But Tolstoy argued the real cause is the sum of countless individual wills, all shaped by underlying laws of history, what Senge would call systemic structures. To understand history, Tolstoy said, we must let kings and generals alone and study the, quote, infinitesimal elements by which the masses are led. This is the core insight of systems thinking. Structure isn't just the organization chart on the wall, it's the key interrelationships that influence behavior over time. In the beer game, the structure included the supply chain, shipping delays, limited information, and the fears and goals driving each player's decisions. But here's the crucial part. We are part of that structure. Our decisions are the structure, and that means we have the power to change it. The beer game players felt powerless. They felt like prisoners of the system, but the truth is, they were prisoners of their own thinking. Most players, trying their best to manage their position, made things dramatically worse. Their frantic efforts to correct the problem only amplified the chaos. But a few players, a small minority, do much better. They succeed because they have a shift of mind. They stop seeing their job as managing their position in isolation. They start seeing how their position interacts with the larger system. They realize their orders don't just disappear into thin air. They influence their supplier's inventory, which in turn affects the delivery delays they experience. They see the vicious cycle. I'm not getting beer, so I order more. My large order wipes out my supplier's inventory. My supplier's delivery delay gets longer. Seeing the longer delay, I panic and order even more. The successful players learn 2 simple rules. First, the take 2 aspirin and wait rule. You don't keep popping aspirin every 5 minutes until your headache goes away. You know there's a delay. You wait. Similarly, you have to account for the beer already in the pipeline, the orders you've placed that haven't arrived yet. Second, don't panic. When your supplier is slow, the worst thing you can do is order more. It takes incredible discipline to resist that urge when customers are screaming, but without that discipline, everyone suffers. These insights only come when you expand your thinking beyond your own position and see the whole system. When you do, you discover timeless wisdom, famously captured by the cartoon character Pogo. We have met the enemy, and he is us. This realization that the source of our problems isn't out there, but in here, in our own thinking, is the beginning of real learning. It's what Senge calls metanoia, an ancient Greek word meaning a shift of mind. It's a fundamental change in how we see ourselves and our world. We shift from seeing ourselves as separate from the world to being connected to it. We shift from seeing problems as caused by someone else to seeing how our own actions create the problems we experience. A learning organization, Senge says, is a place where people continually discover how they create their reality and how they can change it. But how do we make this shift? How do we overcome our learning disabilities and begin seeing the world as an interconnected whole? This is where the 5 disciplines come in. They're not a collection of tips or tricks. They're lifelong practices, developmental paths for acquiring new skills and new ways of thinking. And the cornerstone, the discipline that integrates all the others, is the one that allows us to escape the prison of our own thinking. It is the 5th discipline, systems thinking. Systems thinking is the art of seeing the whole. It's a framework for seeing interrelationships rather than just individual things, for seeing patterns of change rather than static snapshots. It's a language made up of circles, not straight lines. Our everyday language, with its subject-verb-object structure, pushes us toward a linear view of the world. I am filling a glass of water. It sounds simple, a one-way street of cause and effect. I turn the faucet, and the water level rises. But the system's view reveals a different story. As you fill the glass, you're constantly monitoring the gap between the current water level and your desired level. As the gap closes, you adjust the faucet. So is it your hand controlling the water level, or is the water level controlling your hand? The answer is both. They're part of a feedback system, a circle of influence. My intention creates a system that causes water to flow when the level is low and shuts it off when the glass is full. Seeing this circle changes everything. It overturns our simple notions of causality. It shows that every influence is both a cause and an effect. It breaks down the idea that we're at the center of the universe, acting on an inanimate reality. We're part of the feedback process, not standing apart from it. And it suggests that everyone shares responsibility for problems generated by a system. The search for scapegoats is a dead end. This language of systems thinking is built on 2 simple but powerful types of feedback loops. The first is reinforcing feedback. These are engines of growth. They're at work whenever a situation snowballs. A small change builds on itself, creating accelerating growth or decline. Think of a virtuous cycle, like word of mouth for a great product. More sales lead to more satisfied customers, who tell their friends, leading to even more sales. Or think of a vicious cycle, like a run on a bank. A few people withdraw their money, making others nervous, who also withdraw, causing more panic, until the bank collapses. The rich get richer, and the poor get poorer. Both are reinforcing loops. They often surprise us because they accelerate so quickly. Remember the French school children's riddle about lily pads on a pond? The number of pads doubles every day. It takes 30 days to fill the pond. But for the first 28 days, nobody notices. On day 29, the pond is half full and everyone panics. But by then, it's too late. The next day, the pond is full. The second type is balancing feedback. These loops are goal-seeking. They're at work whenever a system tries to maintain stability or reach a target. Filling the glass of water is a balancing process. Your body maintaining its temperature is a balancing process. Steering a car is a balancing process. They're constantly making self-corrections to reduce the gap between where things are and where they should be. Balancing loops can be harder to spot because often it looks like nothing's happening. Things just stay stable. But they're the source of both stability and resistance. If you've ever felt like you're running as fast as you can just to stay in place, you've encountered a balancing loop. Leaders trying to change organizations often run into hidden balancing loops, unspoken norms or power structures that resist change, trying to pull the system back to its old goal. Finally, almost all feedback processes have delays, interruptions in the flow of influence that make consequences of our actions show up gradually. Unrecognized delays cause immense instability. Think of a shower with a 10-second delay between turning the knob and when water temperature changes. You turn it up. Nothing happens. You turn it up more. Still nothing. You crank it all the way. Suddenly you're scalded. You jump back and turn it all the way cold. Now you're freezing. You oscillate back and forth, overshooting the mark again and again. This is exactly what happened in the beer game. Players couldn't see the delays, so they overreacted, creating massive instability. These three elements, reinforcing loops, balancing loops, and delays, are the basic building blocks of systems thinking. With them, we can begin seeing underlying structures, or systems archetypes, that control events. These are recurring patterns, simple stories that play out again and again in our lives and work. Senge identifies several, but two are especially powerful. The first is limits to growth. This story starts with a reinforcing process, a period of accelerating growth. A new company takes off. You learn a new skill and improve rapidly. But then growth mysteriously slows and stops. What happened? A balancing process kicked in. As the company grew, it became more complex to manage, and senior engineers got bogged down in bureaucracy, slowing innovation. As you got better at tennis, you hit the limits of natural ability, and now you need to learn difficult new techniques to improve further. The management principle here is crucial. Don't push on the growth engine. Remove the factor limiting the growth. The second archetype is shifting the burden. This happens when we face a problem with an obvious symptom. We apply a quick, easy, symptomatic solution that makes the symptom go away, at least temporarily. This seems efficient, but it distracts us from the, quote, fundamental solution, which is often harder and takes longer. Over time, we rely more and more on the quick fix. The underlying problem gets worse, and our ability to implement the fundamental solution atrophies. It's the story of using alcohol to relieve stress instead of managing your workload. It's the story of a company using advertising promotions to boost sales instead of developing innovative new products. In each case, the easy way out leads back in. You become addicted to the symptomatic solution, and the original problem becomes harder and harder to solve. These archetypes, and the laws of systems thinking they illustrate, teach us a new way of seeing. We learn that today's problems often come from yesterday's solutions. We learn that the harder you push, the harder the system often pushes back. We learn that cause and effect are rarely close in time and space. And most importantly, we learn that small, well-focused actions can produce big, lasting results if they're in the right place. This is the principle of leverage. Systems thinking is the new dismal science because it shows that most obvious solutions don't work. But it's also the science of hope because it shows there's always leverage, often in non-obvious places, like the trim tab on a giant ship, a tiny rudder on the main rudder. To turn the massive ship left, you don't push on the bow. You go to the stern and turn the trim tab to the right, which sucks the rudder to the left, which in turn sucks the stern to the right, causing the bow to turn left. The leverage is non-obvious, but incredibly powerful. This is the power of the fifth discipline. It's the conceptual cornerstone, but by itself, it's not enough. To realize its potential, it needs the other four disciplines. The first of these is personal mastery. This is the spiritual foundation of a learning organization. It's the discipline of personal growth and learning. Senge says organizations only learn through individuals who learn. Personal mastery is the discipline of continually clarifying what's important to us, our personal vision, and continually learning to see current reality more clearly. Your personal vision isn't a goal or objective. It's a calling. It comes from within. It's the answer to the question, what do I truly want to create? It's not about what you want to get rid of. It's about what you want to bring into being. It's intrinsic, desired for its own sake, not because of where it positions you relative to someone else. The second part of the discipline is a ruthless commitment to truth, seeing current reality as it is, not as we wish it were. The gap between your vision and your reality is the source of creative energy. Senge calls this creative tension. Imagine a rubber band stretched between your vision and reality. The tension seeks resolution. There are only two ways for it to resolve. Either you pull reality up toward your vision, or your vision gets pulled down toward reality. The great danger is what Senge calls emotional tension, the feelings of anxiety, discouragement, or hopelessness that often come with creative tension. If we confuse these feelings with the tension itself, we'll be tempted to eliminate the feeling by lowering our vision. Well, I didn't really want to be a concert pianist anyway. This is the path of mediocrity. The essence of personal mastery is learning to hold that creative tension, to let it be the driving force for change, without letting your vision erode. Failure, from this perspective, isn't a sign of unworthiness. It's simply feedback about the gap between your vision and reality. It's an opportunity for learning. The third discipline is mental models. These are deeply ingrained assumptions, generalizations, and images that influence how we understand the world and how we take action. They're the lenses through which we see reality. The problem isn't that we have them. We all do. The problem is we're usually unaware of them. We mistake our models for reality. Detroit automakers didn't say, "We have a mental model that customers only care about styling." They said, "Customers only care about styling." The discipline of mental models is about turning the mirror inward. It's about learning to unearth our internal pictures of the world, bring them to the surface, and hold them up to scrutiny. It starts with simple reflective skills. One is recognizing our leaps of abstraction. We move from direct observation, the data, to a generalization so quickly that we never test it. We see a colleague, Laura, who rarely gives praise and sometimes seems distracted in meetings. We make a leap of abstraction. Laura doesn't care about people. We then treat this generalization as fact, and it shapes all our future interactions with her, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. The discipline is separating our observations. Laura cut someone off in the meeting from our inferences. Laura doesn't care about people. A powerful tool for this is the left-hand column exercise. You take a difficult conversation you had, and on the right side of a page, you write down what was actually said. On the left side, you write down what you were thinking and feeling, but didn't say. This exercise is stunningly effective at revealing our hidden assumptions and how they drive our behavior, often in counterproductive ways. Once we see our hidden models, we need skills for talking about them productively. This means mastering the balance between advocacy, stating our own views, and inquiry, asking about others' views. Most managers are great advocates but poor inquirers. This leads to what Senge calls a ping-pong game of opinions, where the goal is to win. When you combine advocacy and inquiry, the goal shifts from winning the argument to finding the best argument. You say, "Here's my view, and here's how I arrived at it. What do you think? Do you see any gaps in my reasoning? Do you have a different perspective?" It's a profound shift from a battle of wills to a process of collaborative learning. From the individual's commitment to a personal vision, we move to the collective. The fourth discipline is building shared vision. A shared vision isn't an idea. It's a force in people's hearts. It's the answer to the collective question, what do we want to create? Remember the story of Spartacus. The slaves who stood up and said, "I am Spartacus," weren't loyal to the man. They were loyal to the shared vision he inspired, the idea that they could be free. They were so committed to this picture of the future that they were willing to die for it. Few forces in human affairs are as powerful as a shared vision. It changes people's relationship with their organization. It's no longer their company. It becomes our company. It provides focus and energy for learning. It fosters risk-taking and experimentation. And it creates a pull toward the future that helps us overcome powerful forces of the status quo. But a shared vision can't be imposed from the top. Many leaders make the mistake of going on a retreat, writing a beautiful vision statement, and then trying to sell it to the organization. This, at best, creates compliance, not commitment. Senge distinguishes between several levels of attitude toward a vision. At the bottom are non-compliance and grudging compliance. Then there's formal compliance. I'll do what's expected and no more. And genuine compliance, the good soldier who follows the letter of the law because he believes in the leadership. But beyond compliance are enrollment and commitment. Enrollment is the process of becoming part of something by free choice. You want the vision to be realized. Commitment is a step further. You feel fully responsible for making the vision happen. You'll do whatever it takes. If the rules get in the way, you change the rules. You are a source for the vision. A genuine shared vision emerges from the interaction of personal visions. It grows out of an ongoing conversation where people feel free to express their dreams and learn to listen to others' dreams. The leader's job isn't to have the vision, but to be a steward of the visioning process. It's about being a model, continually sharing your own personal vision and inviting others to share theirs. This brings us to the final discipline, where all the others come together in practice. It is team learning. Team learning is the process of aligning and developing the capacity of a team to create results its members truly desire. Great teams aren't characterized by an absence of conflict, but by the way they make conflict productive. The intelligence of the team becomes greater than the intelligence of the individuals. The discipline of team learning involves mastering two distinct types of conversation: discussion and dialogue. The word discussion has the same root as percussion. It's about presenting and defending different views, analyzing them, and converging on the best decision. The goal is often to win, to have your view accepted. Dialogue, on the other hand, comes from the Greek dialogos, meaning, meaning flowing through. It's not about winning, it's about collective exploration of complex issues. In dialogue, you suspend your assumptions, you hold them up for examination. You don't defend them, you inquire into them. The goal isn't to agree, but to gain richer understanding. In dialogue, a team accesses a pool of common meaning that no individual has access to alone. It's a process of thinking together. A learning team masters the art of moving consciously between dialogue and discussion. They use dialogue to explore a complex issue, allowing deeper shared understanding to emerge. Then, they might shift to discussion, to weigh alternatives, and make a decision. But what gets in the way? The same defensive routines we saw earlier. The fear of exposing our thinking, the habits we have for protecting ourselves from embarrassment and threat. In a team, these defenses can become especially toxic, creating an atmosphere of mistrust and game playing. The key to overcoming defensive routines is making them discussable. A learning team learns to recognize when its members are being defensive, not to point fingers, but as a signal that an important issue is on the table, an issue surrounded by fear or threat. By applying the skills of reflection and inquiry, they can explore that defensiveness without provoking more of it. They might say, "I'm noticing that I'm feeling defensive about this. Can we talk about what's going on here?" In this way, conflict and defensiveness aren't obstacles to learning. They're opportunities. They're like safes that lock up energy. When you unlock them with dialogue and inquiry, that energy is released and becomes available for creating what you truly want. But to develop these skills, teams need what they almost never have: a practice field. No great sports team or orchestra would dream of performing without rehearsing, but management teams are expected to perform, to make high-stakes decisions, without ever practicing how to think together. This is why creating virtual worlds, simulations like the beer game or structured dialogue sessions is so crucial. They're the learning team's practice field, a place to slow down, experiment, see consequences of your actions, and develop collective skills in a low-risk environment. And so we see how the 5 disciplines weave together. Systems thinking is the language for seeing the whole and understanding complexity. Personal mastery is the spiritual engine, generating the creative tension that powers our desire to learn. Mental models are the discipline of being honest with ourselves, of seeing the lenses that shape our perceptions. Shared vision is the collective compass, pulling everyone toward a future they truly want to create. And team learning is the collaborative practice field, where these disciplines are integrated and put into action. Together, they create a profound shift. They move us from a world of parts to a world of wholes, from a world of blame to a world of shared responsibility, from a world of reacting to the present to a world of creating the future. They show us that the organization is a living system, with immense untapped capacity to learn, evolve, and heal itself, and that our role as leaders isn't to be the captain on the bridge, shouting orders. It's to be a designer, a teacher, and a steward. A designer of the governing ideas, the purpose, vision, and values, and of the learning processes through which people can grapple with these ideas. A teacher who helps everyone in the organization, including themselves, to see the systemic structures that shape their reality. And a steward for the larger purpose that the organization serves. A steward's commitment is to something larger than themselves. This is the leader's new work. It's not about being a charismatic hero. It's about building a community of learners, about helping people discover their own power to create the future they truly desire. It's quiet, patient, and often invisible work. The great leader, as Lao Tzu said, is the one of whom the people say, "We did it ourselves." As we come to the end of our journey through the 5th discipline, it's worth taking a moment to step back and reflect on what we've really discovered. This book was first published decades ago, yet its message feels more urgent today than ever before. In a world that seems to be getting more complex, more fragmented, and more reactive by the minute, Peter Senge's work is like a beacon of clarity. What strikes me most profoundly is that this isn't just a book about running a better business. It's a book about being a better human being. The principles of systems thinking, personal mastery, and mental models apply just as much to our families, our communities, and our own inner lives as they do to Fortune 500 companies. Think about the learning disabilities Senge describes. The enemy is out there. How many times have we blamed our circumstances, our boss, or our family for our problems without ever stopping to see our own role in creating them? The fixation on events. How often do we get caught up in daily drama and endless to-do lists, losing sight of the slow, gradual patterns truly shaping our lives? We're all, in our own ways, players in our own personal beer game, often making things worse with our best intentions, because we can't see the whole system. The true gift of this book is that it gives us a language and a set of tools to see those systems. It pulls back the curtain on the invisible structures governing our behavior, and in doing so, it hands us back our power. It shows us we're not just victims of circumstance. We're co-creators of our reality. The moment we see the system, we're no longer controlled by it. This is an incredibly empowering message, but it's also deeply challenging. It requires a level of honesty and humility that can be uncomfortable. It asks us to admit we don't have all the answers. It asks us to expose our thinking to others, to be vulnerable, and to be willing to be wrong. It asks us to have the courage to hold a vision for what we truly want, while simultaneously facing the hard truths of our current reality. For a young person standing at the threshold of their life, this message is especially powerful. You're about to step into a world of immense complexity and opportunity. You'll be part of teams. You'll lead projects. You'll build relationships. The disciplines in this book aren't just for chief executives. They're for you. They're fundamental skills for navigating a world of interdependence. So how can you start practicing these disciplines today, in your own life? Let me suggest 3 simple things. First, for the next week, Just try to notice one system. It could be the dynamic in your friend group, the way your family communicates, or how a project team at school works together. Don't try to fix it. Just observe. Ask yourself, what are the reinforcing loops creating momentum? What are the balancing loops creating stability or resistance? What are the delays? Just by starting to see circles instead of straight lines, you'll begin thinking differently. Second, practice turning the mirror inward. Next time you find yourself blaming someone or something for a problem, just pause. Ask yourself, what's my mental model here? What am I assuming to be true? And then, even more powerfully, how might my own actions be contributing to this situation? This isn't about blaming yourself. It's about seeing your own power in the system. Third, practice the balance of advocacy and inquiry. Next time you're in a passionate discussion or disagreement, make a conscious effort to understand the other person's perspective. Before you state your own point again, try asking a genuine question like, "Help me understand why you see it that way." This simple shift from wanting to win to wanting to learn can transform the entire dynamic of your relationships. In the end, the fifth discipline leaves us with a sense of profound hope and deep responsibility. It reminds us of the story of astronaut Rusty Schweickart looking back at Earth from space. He saw no borders, no divisions, only a single, beautiful, indivisible whole. He realized that everything that means anything to us, all of history, music, art, love, and life, is on that one small, fragile planet. That's the ultimate systems perspective. It's the realization that we're all in this together, part of a single fabric of destiny. The challenges we face, from climate change to social injustice, are systemic problems. They can't be solved by a few heroic leaders. They can only be solved when we, as system citizens, learn to think and act together. That was a summary of The Fifth Discipline by Peter M. Senge. We've journeyed through its core ideas today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. It can show you the landmarks and give you a sense of the terrain, but it can never replace the experience of actually walking the paths, breathing the air, and meeting the people. The real magic of this book happens in the quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or simple phrase connects with your own life in a way you didn't expect. This summary is meant to help you decide if this journey is one you want to take. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity or resonated with your own experiences, I encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about gaining knowledge, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself and the world around you. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable and want to continue exploring the ideas that have shaped the world's most successful people, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It lets us know we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and keep growing together.